I've lied to myself 1,000 times. You left it behind, Danny. You got out. But the real me is still there, at Vietnam's A Shau Valley, plastered to the bottom of some rotted tree trunk. So here it is, my confession, word for word, about the jungle that marked me for dinner. I was Private First Class Daniel Danny Russo, 19 years old in 1969, with dirt from South Philly still under my fingernails. Grew up on Tasker Street where Mrs. Esposito would scream "Porca miseria" from her second-floor window if you stepped on her flowers, and where Pop and his friends would nearly come to blows over Mike Schmidt's batting average between bites of Gino's cheesesteaks. My old man, Salvatore Sal Russo, was a Marine who'd fought across 3 Pacific Islands and came home with a chunk of Japanese shrapnel still in his shoulder and nightmares he self-medicated with a 5th of Seagrams on most nights. So when I enlisted in the Vietnam War, I actually thought combat would connect me to the old man, who'd never said more than 5 words in a row to me. Of course, I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. I'd spent 5 months pulling perimeter guard outside Da Nang, but when the new orders came down, the reaction was instant. A Shau Valley? Even the lifers flinched. They joked to cover the fear, saying the mosquitoes there flew in formation, how Charlie had so many tunnels dug you might drop into one while taking a dump. One staff sergeant held up his hand, missing 2 fingers. Punji got these. Count yourself lucky if that's all you lose in the A Shau. But after lights out, huddled around cigarettes cupped in palms, they whispered different stories. How the enemy we called Viet Cong marked certain ridges with skulls and wouldn't go near them, not even under direct fire. How the locals called it the Valley of Hungry Ghosts and made warding signs if you even pointed in that direction. I overheard a squad leader who'd done 2 tours telling his replacement. Torres went to take a piss, 20 yards away, visible the whole time. Then, nothing. No sound, no blood. Just gone. And Mendez found his boots the next morning, lined up neat as you please, with something black and sticky inside them. I chalked it up as campfire tales, the kind soldiers have always told to scare the new guys. Because luckily, I already had an itemized list of things trying to kill me. Tripwires connected to claymores, snipers who could put one through your eye at 500 yards, and those cursed bamboo vipers that drop from trees. Adding some hooey about forest monsters seemed like overkill, but as I would soon find out, Nam has this way of rewriting the rules. We choppered into Firebase Marlena at 1500 hours on a Tuesday, so hot the air shimmered like a bad dream. I damn near busted my ass stepping off that bird, boots skidding sideways in muck so slick a hockey rink would have been jealous. Christ, Philly, you trying to break your neck before the commies get a shot? It was Sullivan grabbing my collar, yanking me upright. Staff Sergeant Leonard Sullivan, a wiry bastard with a Mississippi drawl and a face like tanned leather cracked from too much sun. Save the acrobatics for when we're getting shot at. You'll need 'em. Firebase Marlena was the most depressing hole I'd ever laid eyes on, and that's saying something. The few men I spotted moved like zombies, shoulders hunched, M16 clutched tight even taking a dump. And standing dead center in this disaster was Captain Armitage, 6'4" of nothing but bone and sinew. Man looked like he'd been on a hunger strike for months. He inspected us with eyes so bloodshot they looked like road maps of hell. "Welcome to Firebase Marlena, the armpit of the A Shau," he croaked. "We're critically short on every goddamn thing except ways to die. No mail for 3 weeks. Half rations. And the water tastes like it's been filtered through the other side." He paused, lips twitching in what might have been a smile if it hadn't looked so much like a grimace. "But we've got hostility. Metric tons of it." Armitage's briefing came next, delivered in the dead monotone of a man reciting his own eulogy. "Listen up, ladies," he said, pacing in front of what had once been a tactical map. "Viet Cong uses this valley like his personal highway. They move through here like ghosts, here 1 minute, gone the next, but the commies aren't what you need to worry about." He stopped, finger tapping a ridge marked with a faded red X. "The A Shau plays by different rules. Not Army rules, not Marine rules, not even the enemy's rules." He paused, letting sweat trickle down his hollow cheeks. Then he rattled off the strangest list of orders I'd ever heard, each one making the last sound almost normal. Rule 1. Never sleep near hollowed tree trunks. His nicotine-stained finger jabbed at that same ridge. Looks like good cover, right? Wrong. That hollow is a damn doorway. Press your back against it too long, you're not waking up. And if by some miracle you do... His voice cracked. Well, what comes back won't be you. Rule 2. Don't follow voices after dark, even if they sound familiar. Armitage's pupils dilated. This valley throws voices like a ventriloquist. Hear your girlfriend calling from the bush? Your buddy who stepped on a mine last week? Your mama promising hot apple pie? Ignore that crap, 'cause what's waiting ain't got your best interests at heart. Rule 3. Never pick up anything except ammunition. No letters, no photos, no dog tags, no Playboys some poor bastard left behind. Nothing. The jungle leaves bait. Touch it, and by sunset, you'll be the bait. Number 4 hit me like ice water down my spine. If you hear strange breathing behind you, don't acknowledge it. Armitage leaned in close enough I could smell his breath. Stale coffee and something medicinal, maybe amphetamines. Wet, gurgling breath, like tuberculosis in its final stage. You'll want to turn around. Don't do it. That's exactly what it wants. An invitation. A gangly private behind me whispered, "Is this some kind of sick hazing BS?" Armitage ignored him, drilling on like he was reading ingredients off a soup can. Rule 5. At night, stay paired up and keep helmets on. No exceptions. He rapped his knuckles against his own helmet with a hollow dink-dink. These tin pots do more than stop shrapnel. They keep certain things from getting inside your skull. Things that shouldn't be there. Things that'll rearrange the furniture upstairs. He tapped his temple. Wear it when you sleep. Wear it every second after dusk. Rule 6. Don't shoot unless it bleeds. Armitage's finger stabbed the air. You'll see movement in those trees. Shapes. Things that look like they've got too many limbs or no head where one should be. Don't waste ammo unless you see blood. Real blood. Half the ammo shortages in this valley come from jackasses shooting at shadows. Things only got weirder with Rule 7. No firefights in the deep fog. 3rd Platoon saw what they thought were commies moving through heavy fog last month. Opened up with everything they had. Next thing we hear is screaming. Not from out there, but from our own guys. When we found what was left. He stopped, Adam's apple working overtime. Let's just say the lucky ones were the ones we couldn't identify. So when that thick soup rolls in, keep your booger hook off the bang switch, got it? Then came the final rule. Rule 8. Leave no footprints in the old shrine. The captain's voice dropped even lower, almost a whisper. There are places in this valley older than time. Spirals of stone, circles of vines. You see one, you go around. Step on it, disturb it. He dragged a finger across his throat. You're marked, and what's marked gets taken. Freaking surreal. Like someone had torn pages from a horror novel and stuck them in the field manual. I shot Sullivan a sideways glance. His face was unreadable, jaw clenched tight. Something about these rules had gotten under his skin. Armitage's head snapped up like a rattlesnake spotting prey. Doubt all you want, he said. I don't give a crap if you believe me. Follow the rules anyway. Maybe you'll just die instead of... What happens to the others? That's when it hit me. He wasn't warning us about dying. Death would be a goddamn mercy compared to what he'd seen. That evening, we hunkered down in our hooches, sweating through our fatigues like we'd been dunked in the South China Sea. I unpacked my sad little collection of worldly possessions, 3 pairs of socks still crusty with Da Nang's red clay, a dog-eared Louis L'Amour paperback with water-warped pages and a broken spine, and the last photo taken of my family. Sullivan fished a half-smoked Lucky from his breast pocket. God, it's hot enough to make the devil call in sick, he muttered. "So tell me, Philly boy, you sorry yet?" Mama Russo's little bambino could have been slinging hoagies at Jim's right now instead of marinating in his own sweat. I forced a grin that felt like cracked glass on my face. Beats frozen pipes and trash strikes. Besides, I always wanted to see the world. "Well, congrats. You're seeing the rear end of it." Sullivan's laugh sounded broken. "This place? It makes hell look like a weekend pass to Saigon. Captain Armitage hasn't slept in weeks. Looks like something's been gnawing at him from the inside out." Outside, the insects screamed, and the blackness between the trees seemed to shift and breathe, even when no wind stirred the branches. Then suddenly, the commotion at the perimeter came like clockwork. Shouted curses, the metallic snick of M16 safeties flicking off, forcing Sullivan and I to grab our weapons and join the cluster of Marines at the wire. Staff Sergeant Menendez, a stocky Puerto Rican with a face carved from mahogany, stood pointing at what looked like a random scattering of rocks. "Tell me you saw something, Peterson," Menendez was saying to a pimple-faced private. "Because we swept that area clean at 1800, and now we got this crap." "Swear to Christ, Sarge," Peterson stammered, his voice cracking like he was 13 instead of 19. "Something moved out there. Tall, hairy things, like gorillas, but they walked upright. 3, maybe 4 of them, just inside that tree line." His finger trembled as he pointed into the darkness. "They were watching us. I felt it. Like being sized up for a coffin." Menendez spat a stream of tobacco juice. "Anybody else see anything?" Head shakes all around. "Maybe it's the commies' psychological ops?" I suggested as Sullivan and I trudged back to our tent. Sullivan's eyes never stopped scanning the jungle. "The Viet Cong is crafty, but he's not stupid. He doesn't waste time with parlor tricks when he could be setting toe poppers or command-detonated claymores." His thumb worried the snap on his holster again. Click, snap, click, snap. "No, this is something else." I'd never seen Sullivan rattled. Not during the mortar attack outside Da Nang where we lost half a platoon. Not when we pulled security for that general's convoy and took sniper fire for 6 straight hours. Not even when they medevaced Kowalski, his legs shredded by a punji pit. But something about this place was getting under his skin, burrowing deep. Dawn brought a new level of weird. The ground fog hung in tendrils that curled around our boots like pale fingers as we discovered the tripwires had been triggered, flares spent and dangling from their mounts. But nothing was missing. Instead, our gear had been rearranged. Canteens lined up in perfect concentric circles. Entrenching tools planted blade first to form a 5-pointed star. A dozen jungle boots paired meticulously, toes pointing inward toward a K-bar knife driven to the hilt in the exact center of the formation. Most unsettling of all, something, had arranged spare 5.56mm shell casings to spell USMC, short for United States Marine Corps, in 3-inch block letters. "What the actual hell?" breathed Cooper, a radio man from Mississippi who'd seen 2 tours and claimed nothing surprised him anymore. "That's some Blair Witch bullshit right there." Sullivan crouched beside the knife, careful not to touch it. "Look at the timestamps on those flares. The last perimeter check was 0400. Whoever did this had maybe 90 minutes tops." "Not whoever," said a quiet voice behind us. "Whatever." We turned to find Toe standing there, barefoot as always, an M1 carbine slung across his narrow chest. Unlike the other indigenous Montagnard people who worked with us, Toe had spent time with the Special Forces teams and spoke passable English. His eyes were tight with worry. "Forest people," he said. "Mountain spirits with skin like tree bark." "What, like big monkeys?" Cooper snorted. Toe's gaze cut through him like a machete. "Not monkeys. Old. Very old. They watch. They test." He pointed to the arrangements. "They speak. Send warnings." "Warnings about what?" I asked, the hairs on my neck standing at attention. Toe looked at me, then at Sullivan, his expression grave as a funeral procession. About the valley, about what sleeps beneath. They throw rocks to tell us to go away. This not your place. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Sometimes they throw more than rocks. Sullivan pulled him aside, voice low but urgent. Have you seen them? Up close? Toe nodded once, sharp and quick. Once, when I was boy. Hunting with grandfather near an old French bunker. They took him, left only his feet in his boots. Like somebody. Just erased him from feet up. Armitage materialized beside us, like he'd stepped out of the mist itself. His cheeks seemed more sunken than yesterday. Remember the rules, gentlemen, he said, voice flat as weak old Coca-Cola. Especially after dark. His bloodshot eyes lingered on the arrangements, then flicked to the tree line beyond. They're testing the perimeter. Our resolve. Don't give them an opening. Who's they, sir? Cooper asked, but Armitage was already walking away, shoulders hunched like he was carrying invisible weight. I spent that morning on perimeter detail, digging fighting positions deep enough to survive a direct mortar hit. Each time I drove the blade in, the ground seemed to tense, like muscle tightening beneath skin. When I scooped dirt aside, the hole would be smaller than it should have been, as if the earth was healing behind my shovel. You feel that? I asked Jenkins, who was digging beside me. Feel what? The ground. It's resisting. Jenkins paused, sweat dripping from his nose. Whole country's fighting us, man. Even the damn dirt. Sullivan found me at lunch, his face ghost white beneath his tan. Russo, he said, voice so low I had to lean in. You remember what Armitage said about hollow trees? I nodded. Martinez just found one, 20 yards beyond the wire. He swallowed hard. Big enough for a man to crawl inside, and there's something carved on the inside. Spirals. Hundreds of them. Right then and there, I knew with bone-deep certainty, we weren't just in a hostile country. We were in a hostile place, one that had been waiting for us long before we arrived. Day 3, at 0600 hours, Captain Armitage slapped a map down on the ammo crate that served as our briefing table. Recon patrol. Find out if the commies got any significant presence in this sector. The bags under his eyes had their own bags now. Davis, you'll take point with 11 men, with Sullivan as your number 2. Russo, you're on their team. Staff Sergeant Davis was a barrel-chested black guy from Detroit with forearms like oak branches and a voice that could strip paint. Not a man you argued with. As we prepared to leave for our scouting expedition to look for enemy troops in the jungles, the morning hit us like a wet sandbag. We moved out at 0710, single file, 5-meter spread. Toe took true point, barefoot despite the countless ways that could kill you in this jungle. That little bastard could spot a tripwire under 3 inches of mud from 10 paces. Behind him, Davis, then Sullivan, then me, then 8 more guys I barely knew. New Marine guys mostly, except for Reynolds, a lanky radio man from Tennessee who played a mean harmonica when he wasn't calling in artillery. The jungle swallowed us like a living thing. I ain't being poetic. It physically closed around us, vines slithering back into place after machetes sliced through. Every goddamn plant oozed something. Milky sap, clear goo, red stuff that looked too much like blood. But the worst thing was the silence. You ever been in a jungle? They're loud as hell. Birds screaming, monkeys howling, bugs chittering non-stop. But here? Just our breathing and that obscene pop of our boots. Reynolds whispered it best, like walking through a freaking tomb. Then I started seeing things. Not hallucinations, not exactly. More like movement just beyond my peripheral vision. A branch that bent the wrong way. A shadow that didn't match what cast it. Twice I caught what looked like a face peering from behind a trunk. Something with eyes too big, jaw too wide. But by the time I'd swing my M16 that way, it was gone. Around noon, we hit a flooded section of trail, knee-deep in places, water the color of weak coffee. After wading through that crap for 20 minutes, we called a 5-minute break on slightly higher ground, everyone dropping to haunches, guzzling water that tasted like hot plastic from our canteens. And that's when we heard them, voices drifting through the dense foliage to our left. American voices, clear as day. Told Jenkins that's not how you field strip an M60. Bet the Yankees take the pennant this year. Cindy's last letter said she might be pregnant. Laughter. Someone singing Proud Mary off-key. At first, I thought Armitage had sent another patrol without telling us. But one look at Davis's face told me that wasn't it. We did a quick count. All 12 of us accounted for, huddled in a tight circle, passing looks like nobody wanted to be the first to say it. Toe's hand clamped around my wrist like a vice. "No follow," he hissed, his English breaking down from fear. "Voices lie. Voices eat. Make you follow, then eat." Davis raised a closed fist. Freeze. We all went statue still, barely breathing. But the voices continued, sometimes clear, sometimes muffled, like a radio losing signal. "Should be back at base by 1800. Got a picture of her, man. You wouldn't believe." A burst of laughter. Part of me, the stupid part, wanted to call out. They sounded so normal, so real. These were American boys, maybe lost, definitely where they shouldn't be. We should link up. Safety in numbers. My boot actually slid forward an inch before Sullivan's hand locked onto my shoulder like a C-clamp. Rule 2. Don't follow voices after dark, even if they sound familiar, he whispered, his breath hot in my ear. I don't give a crap that it's daylight. Rule 2. Then, for a horrible second, I swore I heard my mother calling my name, her voice tight with worry like when I'd stay out too late as a kid. "Danny? Danny, where are you, honey?" I squeezed my eyes shut. Not real. Not fucking real. When I opened them, Sullivan was staring at me, his face drawn tight. He'd heard something too. Something personal. As Davis signaled advance, we pushed forward, every man checking his 6 every 3 seconds, nobody talking. The jungle felt even more different now. Roots rose up to trip us. And those glimpses of movement at the edge of vision multiplied, like we were being paced on all sides. We set up our remain overnight position at 1730 in a patch of jungle slightly less suffocating than the rest, a depression where the triple canopy thinned enough to see actual patches of sky. We didn't dare call it a clearing. Clearing in Nam meant exposed, and exposed meant dead. We choked down pre-packed meals, ham and beans for me, which tasted like salty paste mixed with pencil shavings. "My cousin's getting deployed to Chulai next month," Peter said, breaking the silence while picking at a leech bite on his ankle. "Poor bastard thinks he's got it rough. Wait till he hears about this place." "If we live to tell him," muttered Wilson, not looking up from the letter he was writing by flashlight, his 4th to a girlfriend who dumped him 2 weeks ago. We all knew she was screwing his best friend back in Fresno, but nobody had the heart to tell him. "My sister's getting married when I get back. Promised I'd walk her down the aisle since our old man's gone." That desperate small talk, the kind guys make when they're trying to pretend they're anywhere but where they actually are, dried up fast. The jungle at night wasn't just dark, it was primordial darkness, the kind that existed before God said, "Let there be light." I was crushing mosquitoes against my neck when Donaldson approached. Kevin Donaldson, age 19, was from somewhere in Kentucky so rural it didn't have a zip code. I'd heard he'd only joined because his girlfriend was pregnant and her daddy owned a shotgun. But something wasn't right. His face had this weird slack look, and he kept glancing over his shoulder every 3 seconds. When he crouched next to me, I saw he was shaking. "Russo," he whispered, voice higher than normal. I found something." His hand uncurled like a pale starfish. Nestled in his palm was a set of dog tags on a broken chain, caked with reddish mud. I could just make out Wilson T. For Thomas Wilson, not our Wilson, some other poor bastard. "I heard crying," he continued, words tumbling out faster. Like someone hurt, you know? Over by that big fallen log. Thought maybe one of our guys wandered off, got snake bit or something. Followed the sound and found these instead. His eyes had a feverish shine. Gotta belong to somebody, right? Someone's looking for these, gotta be. My stomach did a barrel roll. Rule 3. Never pick up anything except ammo. And dog tags were specifically mentioned. I should have knocked that shit out of his hand, but instead, I looked at his baby face and chickened out. Jesus, Donaldson, I muttered, glancing around to make sure Davis wasn't within earshot. Just keep it zipped, all right? Remember Rule 3? Armitage would have your balls for wind chimes if he knew. Donaldson nodded, shoving the tags into his breast pocket. Yeah, sure. Just thought... I mean, some guy's family might want these, right? I clapped him on the shoulder. We'll figure it out back at base. Just shut up about it for now. 2 hours later, Sullivan shook me awake for my watch rotation. I was having this nightmare where my teeth were dissolving in my mouth like sugar cubes. Took me a second to realize waking up wasn't much better. Donaldson's missing, Sullivan hissed. His face looked carved from granite in the weak moonlight. Did your perimeter sweep 20 minutes ago and the little shit wasn't at his post? My blood went cold. Maybe he went AWOL? In this place? Not a chance. Sullivan handed me my M16. Grab your piece. We're doing a sweep. We found Donaldson 15 meters from camp, sitting with his back against this massive tree trunk that curved like a rotten rib cage. The hole in the trunk was big enough to crawl through, pitch black inside. Donaldson wasn't moving, just sitting there, staring straight ahead, drool glistening on his chin in the beam from Sullivan's flashlight. Donaldson! What the hell are you doing, man? Sullivan kept his voice low. No response. Donaldson's eyes were rolled up, just the bloodshot whites showing. His fingers dug into the mud beside him, twitching like dying spiders. Jesus, is he having a seizure? I moved closer, crouched down. His skin was ice cold despite the jungle heat. The dog tags were gone. I grabbed his shoulders, gave him a shake. Donaldson! Hey, snap out of it. Nothing. Not even a blink. His lips were moving though, just barely, like he was whispering. I leaned in close, ear almost touching his mouth. Help me, he breathed, so faint I almost missed it. I'm in here. I'm in here. I'm in... Then I heard it, right behind me, so close I felt the air move against my neck. A wet, rattling breath, like someone with tuberculosis trying to suck oxygen through a lung full of fluid. Slow inhale, bubbling and viscous. My entire body went rigid as Rule 4 hammered through my brain. If you hear strange breathing behind you, don't acknowledge it. Don't turn around. Don't you dare turn around. My finger tightened on the trigger guard of my M16. The breathing came again, closer now, moist and intimate against my ear. I swear I felt something cold brush the back of my neck, like wet leather. Sullivan's face was frozen in pure terror, eyes locked on whatever stood behind me. Then he lunged forward, grabbed my web gear, and yanked me backwards so hard the straps bit into my shoulders. Go, he mouthed silently, not making a sound. We half ran, half stumbled back to the camp, my legs wobbling like a newborn colt's. I collapsed behind a fallen log, heaving for breath, while Sullivan tersely explained to Davis what we'd found. Davis took 4 men with a lantern back to the hollow tree. I didn't go. Couldn't make my legs work right. When they came back 20 minutes later, Davis's face told the story before he opened his mouth. He's gone, Davis said flatly. No body, no blood, no drag marks. That cursed tree is empty too. Ground's undisturbed all around. Not even our own boot prints from before. We searched for 3 hours, sweeping in ever-widening circles, whispering Donaldson's name into the darkness. But the only trace of him was a faint coppery smell near the hollow tree, like old blood mixed with something I can't even describe, something that didn't belong in this world. Nobody slept after that. We sat in a tight circle, backs to each other, weapons ready, jumping at every sound. I kept feeling phantom breaths on the back of my neck all night, kept hearing Donaldson's whisper in my head. I'm in here. I'm in here. The rules weren't bullshit after all. By dawn, we were 11 hollow-eyed zombies instead of 12. Nobody mentioned the obvious, that we'd left a man behind, the one thing Marines never do. But what do you write on the after-action report when the jungle itself takes someone? We got moving at 0630, forced march tempo. Toe and the other indigenous mountain dweller, a wrinkled old-timer named Bin, kept up a steady stream of whispers. The only word I caught repeatedly was, rock apes. What's their deal with these rock ape things? I asked Sullivan as we slogged through a knee-deep stream that reeked of sulfur. He kept his voice low, eyes constantly sweeping the tree line. They call them rock apes, not because they're apes, but because they announce themselves with rocks. Been throwing stones at fire-base perimeters for years. Locals believe they guard something in this valley, something ancient. The Montagnards have legends about them going back centuries. He glanced nervously at Toe's back. I've seen combat in 3 different provinces. Never believed in any supernatural horseshit. But after what we saw at the firebase, I nodded, remembering those perfect circles of equipment, rocks sailing from nowhere, and those American voices whispering about Yankees games and girlfriends. Armitage's rules are starting to make sense, Sullivan continued, his hand straying to his .45 holster. The men who've been here longest, they're the ones who follow them most religiously. Around 1320 hours, we hit a section of trail bordered by these massive elephant ear plants with leaves bigger than car doors. Davis called a quick break, just enough time to pop salt tablets and refill canteens from the scummy stream nearby. I was fumbling with my iodine tablets when it started. Thud. A rock the size of a baseball slammed into a trunk 6 inches from Peter's head, blasting off a chunk of bark that hit his cheek, drawing blood. "Contact!" he screamed, diving for cover. Before we could even react, more rocks came raining in. They ricocheted off trees, off our helmets, off rifle barrels. One caught Miller right on his helmet with a gong that echoed through the jungle. His eyes rolled back and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. "Return fire!" Davis bellowed, M16 already at his shoulder. "Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" Toe shrieked, actually grabbing Davis's barrel and pushing it down. His face was contorted with pure terror. "Unless they bleed." I remembered Rule 6 then. Don't shoot unless it bleeds. Armitage had been specific about that. But with rocks hammering us from all directions, it was damn hard not to squeeze the trigger. I rolled behind a fallen log, M16 at the ready, scanning for targets. The foliage rustled about 20 meters out. Something was moving through the underbrush. Something big. Not crashing like a bear would, but moving with calculated steps. Then I saw it. Just for a second, but clear as day. All the campfire stories suddenly made horrifying sense. It stood over 7 feet tall, built like a linebacker but way too lanky to be human. Covered in what looked like moss or matted hair, greenish-black against the foliage. But its face, Christ, its face. Eyes like black pool balls, too big, too round, no whites at all. A mouth that stretched almost ear to ear, filled with what looked like bamboo splinters instead of teeth. It moved like nothing I'd ever seen, carrying a smooth river stone the size of a grapefruit in one enormous 6-fingered hand. "Contact! 2 o'clock!" I shouted, swinging my M16 to track it. My finger tightened on the trigger, but before I could fire, the thing was gone. Vanished between one heartbeat and the next. "Where? I don't see shit," Sullivan called back, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead where a stone had nicked him. "It was right there." I jabbed my finger toward the spot. Tall, hairy thing, looked like a crack. A rock whizzed past my ear close enough that I felt the air displacement, the whistle as it passed. It hit a tree behind me and shattered into gravel. A young private named Jackson got off 3 rounds before Davis tackled him. "Hold your fire, goddammit," Davis roared, pinning Jackson to the mud. "Toe's right. We don't shoot until we confirm we're actually hitting something." "I saw it," Wilson screamed, face flushed crimson. "It was right there." "Did it bleed when you shot it?" Davis demanded. "Did you see blood? Tissue? Anything?" Wilson's mouth worked, but no sound came out. The stones kept coming for another 3 minutes, a lifetime when you're being pelted from all sides. Twice more I caught glimpses of those things moving through the jungle, but each time they vanished before I could draw a bead. Their movements weren't random either. They were coordinated, herding us, pushing us away from certain areas, channeling us toward others. Then, as suddenly as it began, the barrage stopped, and the jungle fell quiet again except for Miller groaning as Reynolds helped him sit up, pupils dilated unevenly. Definite concussion. Davis had us form a defensive perimeter while Bin helped Miller. "Lord," Carver whispered, the acne scars on his cheeks standing out livid against his ashen face. What the hell were those things? The kid was one of our newer replacements, barely a week in country when he got assigned to our patrol. Toe made that strange circular gesture around his face again. "They don't want us go that way." He pointed northeast, toward what should have been our original route. "They push us, make us go where they want." I checked our maps, trying to get a fix on our position, but something was wrong. Landmarks didn't match up. A hill that should have been on our left was now ahead of us. A stream we'd crossed earlier now ran perpendicular to its marked course. "Sarge," I said quietly to Sullivan, "the goddamn map's wrong, or ... I hesitated, not wanting to sound like I was losing it, or the jungle's changed. Sullivan studied the map, then the terrain, his expression hardening. "Not just you, kid. I've been watching. Trails twist, trees move." His voice dropped even lower. "These rock ape things, they're funneling us, driving us like cattle." "To where?" I asked, a cold knot forming in my gut. Sullivan's haunted eyes met mine. "Guess we'll find out." Davis gave the order to move out, taking a southerly route rather than continuing northeast. He claimed it was to avoid possible ambush positions, but I saw him watching the foliage, looking for any sign of those moss-covered shapes. We were following the path of least resistance, exactly where the rock apes wanted us to go. Nobody said it, but we all knew. We were being herded all right, straight into the valley's waiting mouth. 2 nights later, exhaustion weighed heavy on our bones. My uniform was a second skin of sweat and filth, crusted with mud in places that chafed with every step. Sullivan and I kept watch in the wee hours, listening to the forest's labored breathing. The darkness was thick as tar, our flashlights barely cutting into it. "You know what's screwed up?" Sullivan whispered, his voice a harsh rasp in the quiet. "I've been having these dreams. Same one, over and over. I'm back home, sitting on my porch in Tennessee. But there's something wrong with the trees in my yard. They're moving, and I realize they've followed me home from here." I didn't answer right away. The idea of the Aishau's influence reaching all the way back to the States made my skin crawl. "It's just a dream," I finally said, not believing it myself. "Maybe," Sullivan sighed. "But sometimes I wonder if we'll ever really leave this place, even when we're gone." Come dawn, we found 2 men missing. Rogers, a comedic loudmouth from Detroit with a gold tooth that flashed when he laughed, and Jones, an older grunt who barely spoke but had eyes that saw everything. All we had left of them were 2 pairs of boots placed neatly at the edge of camp, each boot filled with a thick, green-black sludge. Inside that sludge, swirling patterns made me feel nauseous, like the shapes were moving on their own. I knelt down, recognized the name Jones, scrawled on an insole with permanent marker. Sullivan swore under his breath. "God damn it, Danny, how do we fight this? It's not even a fair fight. It's like the jungle's decided we're dinner." I tried not to panic, but I was losing the battle. The men's eyes said it all. We were facing something that had no business existing outside the realm of nightmares. The rules, the illusions, the vanishings. None of us had signed up for this brand of horror. And that morning, we found another horror. The body of Sergeant Leonard Sullivan. Except he wasn't missing. He was right there, a few yards from my sleeping spot, lying face up, eyes wide open and reflecting the patches of sky visible through the canopy. The night before, he'd been alive and well, sharing a grim joke with me about how we'd open a bar in Saigon if we lived long enough. Now, here he was, sprawled on the ground like a discarded rag doll, a single bullet hole in the center of his forehead. The bullet looked precise, a neat entry wound, like an execution. No sign of the spent casing, no sign of a scuffle, just the matted grass beneath him and his dog tags coiled around his neck. That's the image burned into my mind. My friend, the tough, never-rattled Marine, taken out like it was nothing. The rest of us circled around him in shock, confusion, anger. No one took credit, obviously. And if the jungle had done it, how? The bullet in his head sure seemed very man-made. Captain Armitage, who'd temporarily joined us earlier that day, crouched near Sullivan's body, expression unreadable. "This is new," he murmured, running a finger along the edge of the wound. "The valley's never been this direct." Then he looked at me with genuine pity. "I'm sorry, Russo. I found no comfort in that. If the jungle or something in it was using guns now, we were all screwed. Or was it one of us who'd snapped and turned on Sullivan? Paranoia sank its claws into my brain. My best friend in the unit, the one familiar face who kept me sane, was gone. And God help me. I felt an icy dread that I could be next, bullet with my name on it waiting in the thick air. We buried him right there, as best we could in the wet soil, marking the spot with an improvised cross from 2 broken rifle parts. He deserved better, I thought, blinking back tears that threatened to expose just how young and terrified I still was. What I didn't know then was that I'd find him again, and in a much uglier manner. We humped on with our bullshit recon mission because that's what good little Marines do. Follow the damn orders even when everything's gone to hell. Davis kept checking the map like it still meant something, radioing false coordinates back to base every few hours. Standard procedure. Don't want the folks back home knowing we're lost in more ways than one. My head wasn't in the game. Every 5 minutes I'd catch myself looking for Sullivan, about to tell him something, before remembering he was rotting in jungle dirt 2 clicks back. Around 1400 hours, we bushwhacked into a small break in the canopy. Not a real clearing, just a spot where the trees thinned enough to let actual sunlight hit the ground. That's when it appeared. "The hell is that?" Wilson whispered, rifle instinctively coming up. "Put that down," hissed Davis. "Now." Sitting in the center of the space was this structure. Calling it a shrine makes it sound too dignified. This was some primal crap. A perfect circle of twisted vines, maybe 3 feet high, woven into a spiral pattern so precise it hurt your eyes to follow it. Like one of those optical illusions that make you dizzy if you stare too long. The vines were a sick yellowish green, swollen with some kind of sap that leaked from knotty protrusions that looked disturbingly like nipples. Around the circle, flat river stones had been arranged in another spiral. Each stone was carved with symbols I'd never seen before. Not Vietnamese, not Chinese, not anything human. They looked like a cross between Sanskrit and something a mental patient might scratch into his own arm. The grooves were filled with this crusty brownish-black stuff that could only be dried blood. Toe saw it and straight up refused to go within 20 feet. He started jabbering in Montagnard, making these slashing motions across his chest. The only word I caught was "ta-wheat," repeated over and over. "What's he saying?" Davis demanded. Bin, the older Montagnard, reluctantly translated. "He say this is a spirit place, very old, very bad, hungry place." The old man's face was ash-gray beneath his tan. "He says the jungle eats you here. First the mind, Then the body. Davis ordered us to make camp 100 meters away. "Nobody goes near that thing, understood?" he barked, eyes lingering on the shrine. "That's an order." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sullivan was dead. Donaldson, Rogers, Jones, all gone without a trace. We were being picked off one by one, and nobody had a clue why. That shrine was the first concrete thing we'd found, the first thing that didn't vanish when you looked directly at it. By 200, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. Slipping out of camp was easier than it should have been. Jenkins was on watch, but he was nodding off, jumping at every rustling leaf. I palmed my K-bar and clicked on my red lens flashlight, the one you use when you don't want to announce your position to the commies. Moving through triple canopy at night is like swimming through ink. Every step feels like you're pushing through molasses, while branches scrape your face and vines grab at your ankles. Finding the shrine again was both too easy and too hard. I got turned around twice, but both times I felt a pull, like someone had tied a string around my waist and was gently tugging me in a specific direction. And there it was. The damn thing glowed faintly in the red beam of my flashlight, the spiral pattern seeming to writhe slightly like a nest of albino snakes. The smell hit me first, rotting meat left in the sun, mixed with that sulfur stink that comes from swamp gas. I crouched at the edge, careful not to touch it. My heart was jackhammering so hard I could feel my dog tags vibrating against my chest. "All right, you son of a bitch," I whispered, feeling like a complete jackass talking to a bunch of vines. "What's your game? What the fuck do you want?" My flashlight dimmed suddenly, batteries dying. In the fading red glow, I swear the spiral pattern shifted, rotating clockwise. Curiosity, or something else, made me reach out. My fingertips brushed one vine. It was warm. Warm and slightly pulsing, like touching a vein in someone's wrist. The world lurched sideways. My vision doubled, tripled, then inverted like a photo negative. A blast of vertigo hit me so hard I fell forward, catching myself just before my face hit the center of the spiral. At that moment, I heard it, not through my ears, but directly in my brain, bypassing my senses entirely. A voice, but not a human voice, more like the concept of a voice, translated imperfectly into something my mind could process. "Russo, come inside." It knew my damn name. I scrambled backwards, nearly pissing myself. But the voice continued, buzzing between my ears like a hornet trapped in a jar. "The spiral accepts. The spiral consumes. Enter freely, and your passage will be quick. Resist, and we take you piece by piece." My vision changed. I could suddenly see through things. The ground beneath me became transparent, revealing a vast network of roots and fungal filaments spreading outward from the shrine in all directions. This wasn't a separate structure. It was a nerve center, a ganglion. The tendrils reached for miles, connecting to every tree, every plant, even burrowing into the bones of dead animals. The entire valley was a single organism, and the shrine was one of its eyes. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My brain felt like it was being rewired on the fly. "What do you want from us?" I croaked, words scraping my throat like broken glass. "Why are you killing my friends?" The answer pulsed in my consciousness. "Obey the rules. Feed the soil. Choose your ending." I scrambled away, crawling on hands and knees, too terrified to stand. When I was 10 feet clear, I almost passed out from the vertigo. Somehow I made it back to camp, collapsing into my jungle hammock, shaking like a junkie in withdrawal. My head pounded like someone was driving railroad spikes into my temples. Fever dreams chased me through what little sleep I got. Visions of roots bursting from the ground, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me down into warm, wet darkness where Sullivan waited, eyeless but seeing. I woke at dawn to a burning sensation on my forearm. Rolled up my sleeve to find a perfect spiral carved into my flesh, so precise it could have been done with a surgeon's scalpel. This wasn't in my head. The jungle had literally branded me. I tore a strip from my already filthy t-shirt, wrapped it tight around the spiral. No way was I showing this to anyone. They'd think I was nuts. Or worse, they'd believe me. Either way, I'd be pulled from the mission, and as messed up as it sounds, I needed to see this through. Sullivan deserved that much. Something hardened in me that morning. Maybe it was the remnants of that voice still echoing in my skull. Maybe it was the grief crystallizing into rage. Or maybe it was just good old-fashioned Italian stubbornness that Pop always said would get me killed someday. "You want war, Jungle?" I muttered, checking the magazine in my M16 for the 10th time that hour. "I'll give you war." At 0800 hours, the fog came in like it was hunting us personally. One minute we were humping uphill toward a ridge that might give us eyes on the Viet Cong's movements. The next we were drowning in this soup so thick you could scoop it with a spoon. I felt the spiral on my arm burn as I remembered Armitage's Rule 7. No firefights in the deep fog. My M16 suddenly felt like a toy in my hands, useless against whatever was coming. This wasn't any natural mist. It had tendrils. Actual rope-like strands that wrapped around our legs as we walked, that caressed our faces like wet fingers. It tried to crawl into our mouths, our nostrils, coating our throats with each breath. Davis kept barking orders, trying to maintain control. Keep moving. Stay in visual. Sound off every 30 seconds. But his voice sounded muffled, distorted, like he was shouting through a wet blanket. I could barely see Wilson 3 feet ahead of me. Everything beyond arm's length was just shapes, pale, shifting silhouettes that might be trees, might be men, might be something else. Jenkins kept tripping over nothing, his breath coming in panicky gasps. Reynolds was praying under his breath, a steady stream of Hail Marys punctuated by sharp inhales when shadows moved wrong. That's when the first shots shattered the silence. Rat-tat-tat-tat. An M16 on full auto somewhere behind me, the muzzle flash momentarily illuminating the fog like lightning in a thundercloud. Then a scream of pure animal terror. "Contact! Contact left!" someone shrieked. My heart slam-danced against my ribs. I wanted to yell, "Don't shoot unless it bleeds!" But my voice froze in my throat. More rifles opened up, muzzle flashes strobe lighting the fog. Each flash showed me snapshots of Nightmare, a tall figure with too many joints, a face with no features except a gash-like mouth, something moving on all fours but with limbs bent backward. Oh God. They're everywhere. Wilson's voice, high and breaking. Then everybody lost their shit at once. M16S blazing on full rock and roll, the distinctive chug-chug-chug of Reynolds' M60 joining in, grenade pins popping. I ducked behind this massive banyan tree, trying to get my head straight while bullets shredded bark inches from my face. Through the cacophony, I heard Davis somewhere to my right, screaming for a ceasefire, but nobody was listening. I risked a peek around the trunk, just as a burst of auto fire lit up the fog. In that stuttering light, I saw a shape moving, bigger than a man, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall. Its head was bulbous, featureless except for 2 massive black orbs where eyes should be, reflecting the muzzle flashes like polished obsidian. A stray round caught my helmet, the impact snapping my head sideways and sending me sprawling. My ears rang like church bells, vision swimming with stars. I tasted blood where I'd bitten my tongue. When I could focus again, I realized the shooting had intensified, but now punctuated with these deep, guttural howls that sounded like a cross between a tiger's roar and a man screaming with his vocal cords torn out. Something heavy rushed past behind me, so close I felt the displacement of air. Then rocks started raining down, hurled with enough force to crack helmets. I heard Jenkins scream, a wet gurgling sound that cut off abruptly. Branches snapped overhead like gunshots, showering us with splinters and leaves. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Davis's voice finally penetrated the chaos, hoarse from screaming. Gradually, the shooting tapered off, leaving that eerie quiet that's somehow worse than the noise. Instead of moving or speaking, we just huddled in our separate patches of terror, waiting for the next nightmare to materialize from the fog. When Davis finally ordered us to sound off, only a few voices answered back. The fog lifted around noon, slithering away as unnaturally as it had arrived, leaving behind a scene from a slaughterhouse. Our gear was scattered everywhere, shredded packs leaking ammo. No bodies were found, no blood trails, no drag marks, not even their weapons left behind. Simply erased, like they'd never existed. But there were footprints in the churned-up mud. Some were enormous, three-toed impressions bigger than my helmet, pressed an inch deep into hard soil. Others were more human-sized but wrong, too narrow, toes too long, with claw marks at the tips. I found one print that started as a boot mark and then changed halfway through the step, morphing into something with too many toes. We salvaged what we could and pushed on, shell-shocked and hollow-eyed. Nobody wanted to talk about what we'd seen in those muzzle flashes. Night fell like a funeral shroud. We set up a tight perimeter, everyone back-to-back in a circle, nobody sleeping. That's when the voices started again. "Tommy? Baby, is that you?" Reynolds's head snapped up, eyes wide. "Mom?" he whispered, voice cracking like a 12-year-old's. Wilson clawed at his ears. "Make it stop," he moaned. "That's my girlfriend. She's in Michigan. She can't be here. She can't." From the jungle beyond our pathetic little camp came Davis's voice, his exact drill instructor bark, calling muster, even though the real Davis was sitting right next to me, white-faced and trembling. "What is happening?" he whispered, gun barrel wavering as he pointed it toward his own disembodied voice. "Me?" I heard Sullivan, crystal clear, like he was crouched right behind me, lips almost touching my ear. He was singing that Tennessee lullaby his mama taught him. "Go to sleep, little baby." His voice sweet and familiar. I almost turned around before I remembered that Sullivan was rotting in a shallow grave a few days back. Then the song changed. The melody stayed the same, but the words twisted into something obscene. "Go to sleep, little Danny. Your skin I will peel. Your eyes I will hollow. Your soul I will steal." I jammed my fist against my mouth to keep from screaming. The jungle wasn't just killing us. It was digging through our memories, our relationships, our deepest fears, and turning them into weapons. It knew exactly which buttons to push, which emotional triggers would make us crack. I pressed my hands over my ears, but Sullivan's voice came from inside my head now, no longer needing my ears to reach me. His sweet baritone had transformed into a wet, gurgling sound, like he was singing through a throat full of mud. "I see you, Danny boy. I'm coming for you next. The soil is so warm, so hungry. It wants to taste you. It wants to wear your skin." By dawn, we were a handful of twitching, paranoid wrecks, jumping at shadows, flinching when our own guys spoke. The valley had found our pressure points and was pressing down, hard. And the truly terrifying part? We still had another week before extraction was even scheduled. At the rate we were disappearing, there wouldn't be anyone left to extract. Desperate, and with no trace of the enemy troops we were supposed to find, we tried returning to the firebase, hoping to regroup, or at least get some semblance of safety. About midday, a new horror greeted us. We found a clearing littered with both American and Viet Cong corpses, arranged in a spiral. Their skulls had been crushed, presumably by large rocks that lay nearby, stained dark with blood and brain matter. Some of their dog tags spelled out words in the mud, as if a child had spelled help in crooked letters, but then changed its mind halfway through. I spotted the distinctive shape of an M1 helmet near the circle. With trembling hands, I lifted it, recognized the name scribbled inside in faded marker. Sullivan. The body near it wore Sullivan's face, eyes milky, features twisted in an expression I couldn't read. But this couldn't be Sullivan. We'd buried him days ago. Yet here was an exact copy, arms and legs contorted at unnatural angles, like a marionette with tangled strings. Most disturbing of all, there was no bullet hole in the forehead, though everything else was identical down to the mole on his right cheek. I remembered Armitage's warnings about the jungle bringing back things that weren't quite human anymore. I dropped the helmet, stifling a scream with my fist. This isn't real. It can't be. Turning around, I stumbled away, tears threatening to break free. That's when Toe grabbed me, pointing at the ground. Another one of those vine spirals pulsed just beneath the layer of rotted leaves, the pattern matching the one scratched into my arm. "We must go," he urged in that trembling voice. "Now. Or you end like them." Night fell like a hammer, but we decided to push on anyway, thinking the cover of darkness might hide us from whatever was hunting us. Dumbest decision since Hitler invaded Russia. Davis had us douse our flashlights, navigate by moonlight filtering through the canopy. Not that it helped. More clearly than before, the jungle started, rearranging itself around us. Twice we walked straight into these wall-like barriers of vine. They resembled chain-link fence made of living tissue, each strand thick as my thumb and pulsing with what looked suspiciously like circulating fluid. I took point with the machete, hacking through one of these barricades. Each slash released this god-awful stench, not just plant sap, but something meaty underneath, like cutting into a wound. "Jesus," gagged Reynolds, turning aside to puke. "That smells like meat after 3 days in the sun." As I kept cutting, I noticed things embedded in the vine wall, actual body parts. A human hand, blackened with rot but still recognizable, fingers frozen in a grasping position, half a face, the eye socket empty, cheek bulging with maggots, a boot with something still in it. The vines weren't just growing over these remains, they were growing through them, incorporating them into the structure. "Keep moving," Davis hissed, shoving me forward. "Don't look too close." Too late. I'd already seen enough to fuel nightmares for the next 50 years, if I lived that long. We squeezed through the gap I'd cut. As I passed through, a hanging vine brushed against my bandaged forearm where that spiral was carved. The contact was like touching a live wire. White-hot pain shot up my arm, into my chest, making my teeth clack together. Just as the pain subsided, the sound came. Movement in the jungle behind us. "Company," I breathed, freezing in place. That's when we saw them properly for the first time. Not just glimpses or shadows, but the actual rock apes. Except they weren't apes at all. They moved into a shaft of moonlight about 20 yards back. 6 of them. Tall as NBA forwards, but built all wrong. Limbs too long and jointed in places human limbs shouldn't bend. Their skin wasn't hairy but covered in what looked like moss or slime mold, patches of it glowing faintly phosphorescent in the dark. Their faces were almost featureless except for those eyes, black liquid pools with no whites, no irises. One of them hefted a rock the size of a cantaloupe, arms swinging with a fluid grace that wasn't right, like watching a puppet with too many joints. It launched the stone with devastating accuracy, the projectile whizzing past my ear close enough to feel the air displacement, then thudding into a tree behind me. "To hell with this." Carver raised his M16, finger tightening on the trigger. I slapped the barrel down. "Rule 6, dipshit! Don't shoot unless it bleeds." My voice was a desperate rasp. "Those things don't bleed. They just get pissed." Another rock sailed in, cracking against Carver's helmet with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a melon. He dropped like a puppet with cut strings, out cold, but still breathing. It didn't take long for me to realize that the creatures weren't attacking outright. They were steering us, cutting off certain routes with their barrages, leaving only one viable path forward. I had no other choice but to leave Carver, push ahead, and follow the only open trail. Another betrayal that would haunt me forever. By 0100 hours, we were stumbling through what could only be described as a tunnel of vegetation, a corridor with walls of interwoven vines rising 15 feet on either side, overhead branches forming a cathedral-like arch that blotted out most of the moonlight. The passage was maybe 6 feet wide, forcing us into single file. Davis took lead, his M16 at the ready despite our earlier warnings. The whites of his eyes gleamed in the darkness, sweat streaming down his face despite the night chill. His usual drill instructor composure had cracked, revealing the scared man underneath. "Stay tight," he ordered, voice cracking. Whatever happens, keep... The corridor suddenly widened, spilling into a perfectly circular clearing maybe 50 yards across. Moonlight flooded the space, illuminating a scene from someone's acid-fueled nightmare. At the center stood another altar, similar to the one I'd seen before, with a massive spiral of vines rising from the ground like a demonic wedding cake, maybe 12 feet across and 4 feet high. But this shrine was different, in a terrifying way, because nestled within the coils... "Oh, sweet Jesus," breathed Reynolds. "Skulls. Dozens of them. Some fresh enough to have skin and hair still attached. Some old enough to have vines growing through the eye sockets. They were arranged by type. U.S. military on one side, their helmets still attached, unit insignias visible. The Viet Cong on another, the enemy somehow still identifiable, and others, older skulls that looked European, maybe French colonials, villagers, and older still, skulls that didn't look quite human. For some reason, Davis had gone rigid at the sight of it, his head cocked like he was listening to something none of us could hear. Then, without warning, he began walking toward the altar, his movements mechanical, puppet-like. "Sarge?" I hissed, reaching for him. "Davis!" He ignored me completely, eyes fixed on the spiral. As he approached, I saw the vines actually shift, creating an opening like a hungry mouth. Then I spotted something in the center of the spiral that hadn't been visible before. A battered PRC-10 radio, the old kind we'd phased out years ago, sitting there like bait in a trap. "Davis, stop!" I lunged for him, grabbing his sleeve. "Rule 3, don't pick up anything." He shook me off with inhuman strength, never breaking stride. His eyes were completely vacant, pupils dilated so wide there was almost no iris visible. A thin line of drool leaked from the corner of his mouth. Davis stepped into the center of the spiral, stooped, and grabbed the radio. For one hopeful second, nothing happened. Then the vines exploded into motion. They whipped around him with the speed of striking cobras, coiling around his arms, legs, torso. He didn't fight, didn't even seem to notice as they tightened, constricting like pythons. Thicker tendrils rose from the base of the altar, these ones tipped with what looked like inch-long thorns glistening with clear fluid. One tendril wrapped around Davis's throat, cutting off his startled cry. Others probed at his face, his ears, nostrils, the corners of his eyes. Then, with precision that couldn't be accidental, they plunged into his ear canals, up his nose, between his lips, under his eyelids. His body convulsed once, twice, then went limp, suspended by the vines like a grotesque marionette. A dark stain spread down his pant leg as his bladder released. The entire process took maybe 15 seconds. "Run!" The shout tore from my throat before I even knew I was going to speak. "For God's sake, run!" Nobody needed to be told twice. We bolted away, leaving Davis without a backward glance, pure animal panic overriding everything: training, loyalty, humanity. We crashed back the way we came, only to find the vine corridor had sealed itself behind us. Behind us, the rock apes had entered the clearing, their strange barking calls echoing through the night, paralleling our course, and herding us like cowboys driving cattle. "They're pushing us somewhere specific," gasped Toe, the most English he'd spoken in hours. "Valley wants us somewhere. For something." I didn't want to know what that something might be. After stumbling through the night, when the first light of dawn came, my tongue felt like sandpaper glued to the roof of my mouth. Between us, Toe, me, and the 3 remaining privates, O'Connor, Wilson, and the quiet guy named Jackson, we had maybe half a canteen of water, 17 rounds of ammo, and the souls of men who'd peeked behind reality's curtain and seen the machinery of hell. "The firebase is close," Toe kept insisting, tapping his temple like he had some sixth sense. "I know. I feel." I wanted to call bullshit. Our maps were worse than useless, outright dangerous, leading us into killing zones instead of safe passage. "How the hell would you know?" Wilson snapped, his face crusted with dried blood that wasn't his. "You've been saying that for 3 days," and all we've found is more jungle and more death. Toe just tapped his chest. I know, like an animal knows the way home. Turns out the little bastard was right. Around 1300 hours, we topped a rise and saw it. Firebase Marlena's battered perimeter, sandbags stained black with mold, concertina wire gleaming dully in the afternoon haze. The sight hit me like a shot of pure heroin, a physical rush that made my knees go weak. Thank Christ, breathed O'Connor, a baby-faced kid from Boston who'd gotten religion real quick after seeing what happened to Davis. He crossed himself. Hot food, working radio, real freaking beds. But even from 200 yards out, something was off. No smoke from cook fires. No mechanical clanking from the generator. No shouted obscenities or Hendrix blaring from someone's tape deck. "Where is everybody?" Wilson whispered, his M16 instinctively rising to port arms. We approached like we were walking into a minefield, calling out as we neared the main gate. "Hello, the firebase," I shouted, cupping my hands around my mouth. "Marlena, we've got wounded." "Friendlies coming in." Nothing. Not even an echo. The front gate stood half open, one hinge bent at an unnatural angle like something massive had shouldered its way through. We entered in combat formation, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought was too terrified to function. The silence wasn't just strange, it was impossible. 86 men had manned this firebase when we left. Now there wasn't even the buzz of flies. "Jesus!" Wilson hissed through clenched teeth. "This isn't possible. A whole firebase doesn't just disappear." The firebase looked like its occupants had vanished in the middle of whatever they were doing. A half-eaten can of ham and lima beans sat on a crate, fork still sticking out, the congealed fat now sporting blue-green mold. 3 Lucky Strikes smoldered in an empty ammo can serving as an ashtray, thin wisps of smoke rising like distress signals. A poker game lay abandoned, cards dealt, money in the pot, a $20 bill fluttering in the breeze. I forced myself to breathe through my mouth. "Check the comm bunker," I ordered, gesturing Wilson and O'Connor that way. "Toe, stick with me. We'll check the hooch." We split up, moving through the deserted camp like we were exploring a museum of the apocalypse. That's when I noticed the ground, boot prints everywhere, overlapping, crisscrossing, but also mixed with other tracks. Bare feet, too big to be human. 3-toed impressions like the ones we'd seen after the fog attack. And something else. Drag marks, like dozens of bodies had been pulled across the dirt. The equipment made my blood run cold. Helmets stacked in a perfect pyramid, each with a single bullet hole dead center in the front. Ration tins arranged to spell out hell in the dust, like someone started to write help, but got interrupted. "This ain't the Viet Cong," Toe whispered, eyes darting around like he expected something to leap out from every shadow. "The valley took them, all of them." We retreated and grouped at the command bunker, hoping to raise someone, anyone, on the radio. The equipment was functional, but all we got was static and that same eerie laughter bubbling up from the white noise like a corpse rising through water. "Base actual, this is Recon 6, I repeated for the 10th time, knuckles white on the handset. "Firebase Marlena is compromised. I say again, Firebase Marlena is—" "Somebody come in," O'Connor cut in, yanking the handset from me, his eyes wild with desperation. "For the love of Christ, anybody. My name's Patrick O'Connor. We're at Firebase Marlena and everyone's gone and there's something out in the jungle that's hunting us and—" Toe suddenly stiffened, grabbing my arm with a grip like iron. "We go," he hissed, his face ashen beneath his tan. "We go now." "Screw that," Wilson snapped. "We just got here. There's food, ammo." "Danger inside the wire," Toe insisted, pulling me toward the door. "Death comes inside now." Before I could respond, a measured, deliberate footstep came from the wooden platform outside the bunker. Step, pause, step, pause. We turned as one, weapons rising. A silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the sickly afternoon sun. It wore standard marine jungle utilities, jungle boots, and an M16 slung at port arms. But as it took another mechanical step into the bunker, the dim light revealed its face. My face. The thing had my exact features, down to the scar on my chin from falling off my bike when I was 10. The doppelganger's skin had a grayish cast, eyes sunken and dull like muddy marbles. But it was me, wearing a grotesque parody of a smile. My throat closed up. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't move. The thing that wore my face cocked its head at an angle no human neck should bend. "What?" O'Connor whispered, his voice a strangled gasp. "Russo, what the actual hell is that?" "Shoot it," Wilson urged, raising his own rifle. "Just shoot it, Russo." The doppelganger's mouth opened wider than a human jaw should allow. It raised its M16, pointing it directly at my chest. Jackson, the young private who'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten he was there, suddenly snapped. With a strangled cry, he shouldered his M16 and fired a single round. The bullet appeared to strike the doppelganger's shoulder, creating the illusion of impact with a meaty sound, but no wound appeared. No blood flowed, and when I looked closely, I could see the wall behind it. The bullet had passed through, leaving the thing completely unharmed. "Oh shit," I breathed, Rule 6 flooding back. "Don't shoot unless it bleeds." "Oh shit!" The thing's face contorted into a mask of rage. It let out a high-pitched hiss that sounded like steam escaping a pressure valve, then flickered and disappeared, like a television with bad reception. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then every perimeter alarm went off simultaneously. Trip flares, warning bells, the tin cans strung on wire that served as makeshift motion detectors. The sound of dozens of feet pounded around the compound, surrounding the command bunker. "Defensive positions!" I screamed, falling back on training when rational thought failed me. "Wilson, north corner. O'Connor, east. Jackson, watch the door. Tow." But there was no time to finish. Through cracks and gun slits they approached, figures in marine utilities swarming across the compound. Some moved normally, others loped on all fours like animals. Many had obvious catastrophic injuries, missing limbs, exposed organs, skulls partially caved in. They weren't human, not anymore, but they wore the faces and dog tags of men who'd served here. I saw Rogers through a firing port, the wisecracking Detroit native who'd vanished days ago. His face was a half-rotted horror, yet he moved with military precision, bringing his weapon up. "Get down!" I roared, diving for the floor as the first bullets punched through the thin walls. All hell broke loose. The air filled with wood splinters, dust, and the deafening hammer of automatic weapons fire. We returned fire as best we could, but what's the point of shooting something that doesn't bleed, doesn't die? "We can't stay here," O'Connor shouted over the din. "They'll shred this place." "The back door." I pointed to a small exit behind the radio desk. "Go." Tow and I laid down covering fire while O'Connor and Jackson scrambled for the exit. Just as they reached it, Jackson took a hit, the bullet punching through his upper chest with a wet smack. He staggered, coughing blood, but O'Connor grabbed his collar and dragged him through. "Move your ass, Russo!" Wilson screamed, backing toward the door, firing controlled bursts to keep the advancing Not Marines at bay. Tow and I scrambled after them. We burst into blinding daylight, sprinting across the open ground toward the back gate. "The gate's chained!" Wilson shouted, reaching it first and yanking futilely at the padlock securing a thick chain, a chain that definitely hadn't been there when we arrived. "Over the wall," I ordered, pointing to the sandbag barrier. "Move!" We scrambled up the crumbling sandbags, bullets whining overhead like angry hornets. Jackson couldn't climb with his wound, so Wilson and I hauled him up, ignoring his screams as the movement tore his wound wider. Just as I was about to drop over the other side, movement caught my eye. One of the Not Marines stood 20 yards away, pistol raised. For a sickening moment, I recognized Captain Armitage's gaunt features, though his eyes were now white, his skin gray as week-old meat. The .45 in his hand looked terrifyingly real. He fired as Tow yanked me down. Pain seared across my outer thigh. Just a graze. but it felt like someone had pressed a hot iron against my skin. We tumbled into the elephant grass on the far side, rolling, scrambling, desperate to put distance between ourselves and the nightmare behind us. How long we ran, I couldn't tell you. Time lost meaning. Eventually, we collapsed in a small clearing, our lungs on fire, legs trembling. Jackson was gone, bled out somewhere during our retreat, his eyes staring sightlessly at the canopy. O'Connor sobbed as he folded the dead man's hands over his chest. "My mom," Jackson whispered just before the end, his voice thick with blood. "Tell her. Sorry I didn't write more. Tell her the letters are in my footlocker. Back home." "I will," O'Connor promised, though we all knew the likelihood of any of us making it home to fulfill that promise was vanishingly small. Toe wept silently, pressing a filthy bandana to the wound in his arm where a bullet had grazed him. Wilson stared into the middle distance, eyes vacant, hands mechanically checking and rechecking his weapon's action. We were down to just the 4 of us now. 4 out of the 12 that had started our patrol. And the jungle wasn't finished with us yet. Not by a long shot. The light faded to that purple gray you only get in jungle evenings. I could still hear sporadic pops from the direction of the fire base, but they were getting fainter. Either we'd put serious distance between us and whatever the hell those things were, or they'd found easier prey. A mist crept through the underbrush, ankle high and thick as cigarette smoke, curling around our boots like it was tasting us. My canteen was empty. The wound on my thigh throbbed in time with my heartbeat, the field dressing already soaked through with blood and sweat. I'd lost my helmet somewhere during our retreat, and my skull felt naked, exposed. Wilson lay flat on his back, chest heaving, eyes fixed on a patch of sky visible through the canopy. "You think they'll send someone when we don't report in?" Wilson gasped between breaths, his voice thin with desperation. "Who's they, man?" I croaked, my throat raw from running and dehydration. "You saw the fire base. Everybody's gone or changed." Wilson's face crumpled. "Christ, my sister's getting married next month. I promised her I'd be there. I really promised her." "We won't make it out," Toe whispered, the first words he'd spoken in hours. "Valley hungry. Valley always take." "Shut up with that shit," Wilson snapped, struggling to his elbows. "We're getting out. We just need to... His voice trailed off, unable to complete the thought with anything resembling a plan. I forced myself to my feet, knees protesting, muscles screaming. Someone had to keep it together. I unslung my M16, checking the magazine out of habit. 3 rounds left. Might as well be shooting spitballs at a tank. "We rest 30 minutes, then move north," I said, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "If we hit Route 9, we might find friendly patrols." "You stupid," Toe muttered, shaking his head. "No Route 9 here now. The valley swallowed it. The valley changes all things." My eyes followed his gesture toward a small break in the foliage about 50 yards off. That's when I spotted him. Captain Armitage laying on the ground, fully dead this time, recognizable despite the state of his body. He lay spread-eagled, arms and legs pinned to the ground with bamboo stakes driven through his palms and ankles in a grotesque crucifixion. Armitage's face was frozen in an expression of absolute betrayal, not just fear or pain, but utter disbelief, like the universe itself had broken a sacred promise. I remembered the captain's warning about the 8th rule, how disturbing a shrine would mark you, make you a target. The spiral on my arm throbbed with each step. Why had it taken Davis immediately but seemed to be consuming me more slowly? Toe had explained once when we were alone. The shrine wants you whole. Some people it takes fast, others it saves, makes special. You touched only the edge, partial marking. Davis went to the center, full marking. He created those rules, I muttered, backing away from the grisly display. Tried to warn us. But it didn't save him. "We gotta get the hell out of here," Wilson repeated. But as I turned to agree, the snap of a twig froze me in place. 20 yards away, at the edge of the small clearing, stood my doppelganger again. Toe began babbling in his native language, backing away, hands making warding gestures in front of him. His terror was so raw, so primal, that it broke through my paralysis. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Why do you look like me?" The thing tilted its head, regarding me with sick fascination. Its lips didn't move, but I heard its voice inside my skull all the same, a wet, slithering sound like words pronounced by a tongue not designed for human speech. "You already belong to the valley, Danny Russo. The mark shows it." It gestured to my forearm, then to its own matching spiral. "The shrine has tasted you. Your flesh is promised. Your bones will nourish. Your memories will feed the collective." "Go to hell," I spat, raising my M16 despite knowing bullets would do nothing. "I'm not feeding shit." The thing smiled. "This form pleases you?" it asked, gesturing to its body. "My body. We borrowed it from your mind. To ease your transition. All who enter the valley become part of the valley. Some fight. Some surrender. The end is the same." Images flooded my mind. Donaldson, Sullivan, Davis, all the others. Their bodies melding with the vines, their consciousness absorbed into some vast, ancient intelligence that spread through the entire valley. I saw the French colonials who'd come before us, the Japanese before them, ancient Chinese armies, tribal wars, all of them now part of a single organism that had evolved to hunt, trap, and consume human beings, body and soul. "The others," I managed to whisper. "Are they still conscious in there?" The doppelganger's smile widened impossibly. "Ask them yourself. Soon." It raised my M16, an exact copy of my own, down to the notch in the stock where I'd scraped it jumping out of a Huey 3 months ago. Its finger tightened on the trigger. "Time to join the valley," it whispered directly into my brain. "No," I choked out, a pathetic last act of defiance. Toe yanked me sideways just as the doppelganger squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash blinded me. The sound deafened me. I felt the bullet's passage as a searing line of heat across my ribs, a graze, not a direct hit. I staggered, falling backward into undergrowth, Toe still clinging to my arm. Wilson screamed something unintelligible, firing his last rounds. I glimpsed the doppelganger advancing on him, its movements jerky like stop-motion animation. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Wilson thrown backward like a rag doll, his chest erupting in a spray of crimson as the thing that wore my face put 3 rounds through him at point-blank range. His eyes met mine for one final moment, shocked, betrayed, dead before he hit the ground. The last thing I heard was Toe's prayer, a desperate chant in a language I couldn't understand. And the last thing I felt was the ground beneath me, moving, shifting, like the earth itself was breathing. Then nothing. I wish I could tie this up with some Rambo-style last stand, or tell you a Huey helicopter swooped in at the last second while Fortunate Son played in the background. That'd make a hell of a movie, wouldn't it? Truth is, I don't know exactly how I got out. My memories after that thing put its rifle to my chest are fragments. What I do remember is that I surfaced 3 weeks later in a field hospital outside Cam Ranh Bay, pumped full of antibiotics, tubes snaking from my arms and nose. The ceiling fan above my cot spun lazily, casting shadows that made me scream until they sedated me again. The wounds in my side and leg had gone septic, my fever spiking so high the docs later told me I'd flatlined twice. "You're one lucky son of a bitch, Russo," the surgeon, a lanky captain from Minnesota, told me during rounds. "Whatever dragged you out of that valley left you in a clearing right where a dust-off crew was extracting wounded from another op. Any other spot, you'd have been jungle fertilizer." When I asked about Toe, about Wilson, about what happened to Firebase Marlena, he just shook his head. "Sorry, man. According to the brass, Firebase Marlena got overrun by the commies 3 days before you were found. Everyone either killed or missing in action. Your Montagnard guide was the one who flagged down the medevac chopper. He disappeared right after they loaded you on board. But that's not, I began, trying to sit up. He pushed me back down, his expression hardening. Listen to me carefully, Private. The official report says the firebase was hit by Viet Cong. Period. A tragic casualty of war. His eyes darted to a colonel passing in the hall, then back to me, his voice dropping. Even though we both know the place was found intact but completely abandoned with no signs of combat. Whatever else you think happened out there is just the fever talking. And if you know what's good for you, that's the story you'll stick with for the official report. I saw it in his eyes. We both knew how the system worked. Some truths get buried deeper than bodies. The army shrink who evaluated me, Dr. Weiss, with his wire-rimmed glasses and neatly trimmed beard, was even blunter. Hallucinations caused by combat stress, dehydration, and jungle fever, he said, barely looking up from his clipboard. Textbook case. The spiral, I insisted, showing him my forearm where the mark still stood out, angry and red against my pale skin. How do you explain this? He glanced at it, unimpressed. Self-inflicted wound, common in dissociative states. We see this in about 20% of severe PTSD cases. I didn't do this to myself, I said through clenched teeth. No? He raised an eyebrow. The alternative is that a sentient jungle carved occult symbols into your flesh before trying to absorb your consciousness. Which seems more plausible to you, Private Russo? Put like that, I sounded batshit crazy, even to myself. They shipped me home a month later, once I could walk without ripping my stitches. Honorable discharge, Purple Heart, and a fistful of pills to keep the nightmares at bay. The official report listed me as the sole survivor of a Viet Cong ambush, with all other personnel at Firebase Marlena presumed killed in action. Sullivan, Carver, Davis, Jackson, Armitage, Rogers, Wilson, O'Connor, Peterson, all their names stamped out with that bureaucratic finality. As for Toe and the other Montagnard, they didn't even make the report, just vanished from official history, like they never existed. I tried to find records of Armitage's strange rules, of the rock apes, of anything to validate what I'd experienced. Nothing. Whatever files might have contained that information were either buried in some Pentagon sub-basement or never existed in the first place. That was 69. Now it's 83, and I'm sitting in my shitty apartment in North Philly, jumping at shadows and drinking Jim Beam straight from the bottle most nights. The docs have me on enough meds to tranquilize a rhino, but they don't stop the dreams. Nothing stops the dreams. I wake up screaming 3 nights a week, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of jungle rot in my mouth. My neighbors have stopped calling the cops when they hear me. Just another messed up NAM vet having flashbacks, nothing to see here. The worst part is the spiral. It's still there, etched into my left forearm, the scar tissue raised and ropey. Some mornings I wake up and it's inflamed, pulsing with heat like it's freshly carved. Other times it itches so badly I've drawn blood scratching at it. And sometimes, when I'm half asleep, or drunk, or caught in that twilight between waking and dreams, I swear I can feel it moving beneath my skin, tendrils spreading through my veins like roots through soil. Last month I went to this group therapy thing. Bunch of guys sitting in folding chairs sharing war stories. Most of them had the usual nightmares, firefights, booby traps, losing buddies to sniper fire. Garden variety horror, if there is such a thing. Then this wiry guy from the 101st Airborne, Rodriguez, starts talking about a patrol he was on near Khe Sanh. How they found this clearing with bodies arranged in a spiral. How they heard voices calling their names from the trees. How his buddy disappeared without a trace, and they found just his boots the next morning, filled with this black sludge. I cornered him after the meeting. "The A Shao," I said, not a question. His eyes widened, then narrowed with recognition. "You too?" I rolled up my sleeve, showed him the spiral. He unbuttoned his shirt, pulled it aside to reveal an identical mark over his heart. "How many of us, you think?" he asked. "Not many," I replied. "The valley doesn't let many go." "It's not done with us," Rodriguez said, eyes darting around like he expected to see jungle vines sprouting from the linoleum. "I can feel it. Waiting. Some nights I wake up and there's mud on my sheets. Real mud from somewhere that ain't Philadelphia. And footprints on my floor that ain't mine." "Yeah," I nodded. "I heard my doppelganger knocking on my door last week. 3 sharp raps, just like the breathing we'd hear in the jungle. When I finally got the balls to open up, nobody was there. Just a smear of something that looked like black moss on the doorframe." Rodriguez grabbed my arm, fingers digging in. "The rules," he said urgently. "You remember the rules?" I nodded, reciting them from memory. The 8 commandments of the Ashao. Rodriguez nodded with each one, lips moving silently as if in prayer. "I've been following them," he said, "even back here in the world. Never took my helmet off at night when I first got back. Wife thought I was nuts. Never follow voices, not even when my kid calls me from his bedroom. I check first, make damn sure it's really him." "Do the rules work?" I asked, desperate for any reassurance. He laughed, brittle and sharp. "They buy time, brother, that's all. But the Ashao, it's patient. It marked us. It'll wait." 2 weeks later, Rodriguez's obituary appeared in the VA newsletter. Apparently he had ended his life, found hanging in his garage. But the article mentioned one detail that made my blood freeze: spiral patterns carved into the floor beneath his feet. So here I am, typing this up on a battered Remington, hoping that somehow, by putting it all down on paper, I'll exorcise a piece of the jungle that followed me home. But I know better. The Ashao isn't just a place. It's a living entity, ancient and patient, with roots that reach across oceans and decades. So if you've listened this far, if you've stuck with my ramblings about a jungle that hunts and devours, about rules that don't save you but might buy you time, take it for what it's worth. Maybe I'm just another PTSD case, too many drugs and too much booze and too many nightmares melting my brain. Or maybe there are places in this world that operate by different rules, older rules, hungrier rules. And maybe those places can mark you, follow you, claim you, no matter how far you run. That's the end of this story. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.